Have you ever wondered how some people make eating healthy, exercise, and managing stress look so easy? You can too. Welcome to Wellness Wisdom, where we uncover the secrets to lasting health and happiness and empower you to make wise health choices, see results, and create a healthy lifestyle for good. Join Camille Kennard, licensed social worker, certified health and wellness coach, a self-care specialist on the journey to explore how to make health and well-being possible for you. It's a health and wellness journey you can take together. Please welcome your host, Camille Kennard.
Welcome, everybody, to Wellness Wisdom today. We're talking about freedom from limiting beliefs in the month of July. You know, when you think about freedom, releasing yourself from something that's holding you back, something that feels like it's trapping you or keeping you from being who you're meant to be, being your best self. And I'm really excited for this podcast today, this episode. You guys are going to love it. My guest is Carlyn Shaw. Carlyn, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
I am really super excited to have you. Carlyn and I have actually never met in person, but we met through a common friend that we have in Denver, Colorado, Cami Gildner, who's part of the eWomen Network with me. So I'm super excited for this conversation. Carlyn has an amazing story to tell, and I'm really excited to let you guys really get to know her. I'll tell you a little bit about her. She's a Synchronicity Simulator, a connection coach, a motivational writer and speaker, and the founder of Stranger to Friends. At 19 years old, she was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. And followed by that, she had the death of two of her best friends in separate accidents. This was a profound physical and spiritual awakening that ignited her to her intuitive superpower. Now she's self-healed from MS, and she trusts nothing happens to her, but everything happens for her. Allowing fear to spring her forward rather than keeping her stuck, Carlyn has planted her feet all over the planet, turning strangers into friends and creating ripples of conscious connection. I love that. She inspires her audiences with real-life examples of possibilities through the power of perspective, awareness and action in the face of adversity. I was thinking about that, how important that is. She knows our stories connect us, and she wants to help us move from strangers to friends, and this is a movement she's created. She believes that healing occurs when we shift our story to serve us and share with others from a space of support versus sympathy. I love that. So, Carlyn, I know that you have a really moving story to share with us, and probably when people hear, I healed my MS, they're kind of curious, what did you do? What supplement did you take? Or how did you do that? Can you share with us a little bit, maybe what happened, your diagnosis? I know you were 19 when this all kind of started.
Right. I know I'm 41 years old now, so it really is my own story when I share this story of my MS journey. When I was initially, and it's to say we've healed ourselves, like to anyone listening, like it is a process, you know? Mm-hmm. And so the story I share, it's not, there's one answer for everybody. And I just always want to put that out there, that it's the journey of a lot of self-work, you know, and a lot of self-discovery to find those answers. And that's what my story is. Because at 19, it was 1997, there was no Google invented yet. So there was no way to actually look for anything outside of ourselves, which is wild to think about now. But I woke up, I was a sophomore in college, and I woke up and literally, if you drew a line down my body, like the entire left side of my body was numb. And then my right eye was blurry, but my right scalp was tingly. And so it was having all of these symptoms going on in my body that were not only had it unfamiliar, but like I've never even heard of them being a thing for anything, you know, like when you're 19 years old, you're definitely not thinking about autoimmune diseases, you know?
Right.
So, I called my mom and I was like, Mom, have you ever slept so hard your whole body falls asleep? Because that's what it felt like. And, you know, through some trial and error, I went to one doctor, which then led me to another doctor. And I ended up at a back and neck specialist. And he had me close my eyes and, you know, wanted me to let him know when the needle was touching me versus the cotton swab. And I couldn't tell the difference.
Oh, wow.
And so this is what led to the MRIs and the spinal tap and my initial diagnosis. And, you go through this process where you're just kind of hearing what the doctors are saying, but it's not really like registering it's like this out of body experience, And so faced with this uncertainty and fear, I was definitely scared, but I also remember being like, wait, I didn't have this like last week, and now I have this week. Like, what was different? Like, what's going on in my body? And the only research I could do was going to the National MS Society website, because there was nothing else out there. But in reading it, I was able to see like, it wasn't a death sentence. Like, there were people living with it. So I decided just to embody this, knowing that, okay, I have this, now what? As opposed to, okay, my life is over. And one interesting part of my diagnosis story is that there's two ways you get confirmed for MS. There's the lesions in your brain from an MRI, and then there are proteins from a spinal tap that you're going to get in fluid. Well, the lab that did my spinal tap actually lost my samples, and which is unheard of in a way, like that just doesn't happen. But I'd experienced some complications from my spinal tap, and the last thing I wanted to do was do the test again. So the doctors were like, we're pretty sure you have MS just based on your MRI. And so in my brain, I go, okay, well, it looks like we only have half the test results. So I'm going to decide that the other test would have come back that the proteins weren't there. So there's only a 50% chance I have MS. And literally anytime someone would ask me, I heard you were diagnosed with MS, that was the story I started saying. Well, actually, there's only a 50% chance I have it. So I'm going to go with the glass half full on this. Because at this point, my symptoms were now gone. Because the symptoms weren't, with MS, for me, they weren't symptoms that happened and lasted. They happened, I had an exacerbation, they put me on steroids, eventually, like a couple of weeks later, like everything was back to normal, So I thought, oh, well, if it can go back to normal, then there's the chance it won't happen again. And so rather than be in this state of woe is me, I don't know. I look back on it and even wonder myself how I was able to not be in this pity, woe, like scared state, but was able to shift it. But I think back, and that's the gift I gave myself.
That's
so
huge.
Then, yeah, it's like when we're diagnosed with anything, we're immediately handed fear.
Yeah.
There's some new normal we didn't ask for. And we're not expected to just snap our fingers and accept it and move forward. There is this time period of acceptance that has to happen. But in that same time period is that opportunity we get to kind of choose like how we're going to respond and what we have control over.
I love that. So you were able to kind of step back and say, well, I can shift my perspective on this and look at the possibility of living well with it, living with it. Because I think for so many people, like you say, there's a diagnosis of an illness and then there's this grief, right? Oh no, now my life is over. And a lot of that is what we're saying inside of our heads, right?
Well, and it's interesting you bring up the word grief, because that is the big piece that I think really was the catalyst into the real shift in my perspective. And so you think you're invincible at the age of 19. I mean, literally your job is to be in school. Nothing can hurt you. You're if anything, you're more worried about like fraternity parties, and you're just being normal. You're a kid, you're still a kid. And so MS was not kid-like. It's very adult to have to be thrown at that age without any resources and without knowing anyone else that was experiencing it. I mean, you have to adult really, really quickly. But the other area where I had to adult really quickly and learn I wasn't invincible was, I had a group of 5, there was 5 of us that were best friends. And the first month after I was diagnosed with MS, one of the gals that was one of my best friends died in a tragic car accident. Wow. And so 1 month after my diagnosis, like you think MS is this big thing you have to deal with, but it's way harder at 19 years old to bury one of your best friends.
Oh yeah.
You really start looking at life in a whole different way. And you start talking to your friends about life in a whole different way. And so these group of friends of mine for the next 8 months, we kept in touch with each other more. You know, we challenged each other more. We were just so much more aware of life. And so when 9 months later, the friend who called me to let me know that my friend had died, she herself died in a car accident. It's almost unheard of.
Both were car accidents.
Both were car accidents.
Wow.
Both were 10 months within my diagnosis of MS. And they're buried next to each other. It's this crazy story that even when I tell it, even 22 years later, it's still wild that like, this is my story. Sometimes we all have stories, but it's like, you don't wish it upon anybody, but it put my health and my life and everything into a whole new trajectory. And it's not that I began to live in, I say that like fear became my fuel. And it's not that I was, so to say, motivated by fear, but this knowing that once upon a time, you know, for this moment in time, my body wasn't, I didn't have control over my body. And for many people out there, they were associating that with a death sentence. You know, like we get fearful of, oh, this was just handed to me. My life's never going to be the same. But then when both of your best friends die, you're like, wait a minute, this is death.
Yeah. That's the reality.
Me being diagnosed with MS isn't actually death. I'm alive. I actually have a life sentence. And so I think it's a little unique because it's hard for someone to have that perspective without being in the story. But, you know, the depression and the uncertainty and all of this, I had choices of, well, what am I going to do for myself now? I was on MS meds. I didn't know if the drug was going to come back. And I needed a way to lift myself up out of this hole that I was in of just, it wasn't so much a woe is me, but it was sadness. It was a lot of sadness. And that is stress on the body. I mean, these are all the things that lead to other things, you know? And so at a young age, again, before there was social media and we were being inspired by anybody or comparing anything, I learned that I could go study overseas for a semester in college. And the idea had never crossed my mind. And I applied to go to London and I got accepted. And in doing this, that was way out of my comfort zone. And I took my MS meds with me and I took the spirit of my friends with me. And all of a sudden I was in Europe and I was living in a whole different world. And I was like, I wouldn't be here if I hadn't gone through everything I just gone through to inspire me. And to have that aha, I think at the age of 21, once you have that awareness, you can't really be unaware to it. And for the rest of my life, that's kind of been how I've taken on any of the MS, any of the ways, anything, anytime someone's presented itself to me, that's felt like I didn't ask for this. Why is this happening to me? What can I do to help myself? And I had a second exacerbation with MS in 2004, which was very different than my first MS exacerbation. I actually woke up to go to work just like any other day, and I had paralysis on the left side of my left leg.
Oh, wow.
So I couldn't walk. I couldn't drive my car because I had a stick. I couldn't feel the clutch. And I had no idea what I had done differently the day before to make me this way the next day. Because you start going, oh, the what ifs. What could I have done? What could I have done? You know? But again, it reignited that spirit in me that had taken me to London in the space of what can I do for myself, you know? So rather than not go to the gym and work out, I called it a wiggle in my walk. Like I still took myself to the gym and I went to the recumbent bike and I used the leg that did work, you know, and I allowed myself to, instead of being in this space, I've always allowed the setbacks to become some sort of stepping stone. And I think when we're going through anything in life, that's just an attitude we have the choice to adopt that can make every day a little better. And if we make every day a little better, all these days add up. Does that make
Yeah, I think that's such a powerful thing to say because any of us might have a challenge or a hardship or something we're going through where we can say, why me, and sit in that sadness and that despair and that grief. Or like you said, okay, what do I do now? What's the next step? I love that you said it was kind of a stepping stone for you, rather than, holding you back. It's like, what can I do? And I love your perspective. This is why I wanted to have you on the podcast, because I do know so many people. For 8 years, I worked in home care and hospice that have had chronic illnesses, and that mental shift and that psychology behind it, I think, is so powerful. What did you notice in shifting your perspective? Because I believe the mind and body are so connected. What did you notice? Did you notice any changes in your MS symptoms as you were shifting that perspective?
So yes, because I gave myself confidence in a way that only I could give myself. In 2005, so after my exacerbation with the paralysis in my left leg, I subsequently was let go from my job like 3 months later. But It felt like this, I didn't really appreciate losing my job, but at the same time, I wasn't that happy in my job, and I never would have quit. And I think that's a big part of it too. It's like, where are we living in alignment to ourselves? Like when you recognize you're unhappy, like, what are you doing about that?
Yeah.
So here I was with this new awareness of my leg, and also unemployed. And I decided to follow through on a dream of mine that I had been thinking about for years. And that was to live and work in Australia for a little bit. But like, again, way out there, like, how could someone like me accomplish that? And I'm making a super long story short that I ended up working for a nonprofit, and I took a bottle of prednisone with me over there. I was like, there's universal health care. I did everything in my power to be responsible around this idea of traveling. And while I was there, I was taken by a new friend that I met to see a movie at the movie theaters called What the Bleep. Have you heard of it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So for anyone listening, it is the movie that was it was such a catalyst in my journey. I can't stress it enough. I was 26 years old, and I met a guy from Toronto who took me to see What the Bleep. And I'm watching on a movie screen this awareness that our thoughts have so much power over our physical body. And it was where I was introduced to Joe Dispenza. It was where I was introduced to this idea of what is reality. Is the reality what we think? Is the reality what we see? Is the reality what other people tell us? And I was aware that I was implementing some of these practices into my life. I just never seen them defined by anybody else, And now I thought, wait, this is a thing? It's a real thing that I can think certain things and change my body. And so they referenced the work of a Dr. Emoto, whose study was around water and how our thoughts can change the molecules of water. And there's this one scene in the film where he goes, well, the body is 70% water. Imagine what your thoughts do to you. And it was like my mind exploded in hearing that. So when you say, like, how did this help in my transformation? It wasn't like an overnight, like, snap my fingers, oh, I'm going to think better, and therefore my perspective's changed and I'm healed. It really was this journey, because a lot of where I had to heal was my self-love. It wasn't healing MS. It was healing myself. I struggled. Like, I look back on my diagnosis, and I'm not surprised, actually, that I was diagnosed. And that's a hard thing to say, because it's a hard thing for anybody out there listening to think that we have a role into why we are experiencing what we're experiencing. We want to believe it's coming from something outside of us that can easily be corrected. And for me, that's not my story. I remember being 7 years old and looking at my body, wondering why I was in the body I was in. I was so young, and I was already comparing myself to other people. I struggled with an eating disorder. I struggled with body image. I struggled with speaking my voice. And like, it's not like my parents raised me wrong to become this. This was some inner stuff that I had that I was supposed to journey with. And so I think one of the reasons I'm healed the way I am is I'm not that 19-year-old anymore. if I was still talking to myself the way that 19-year-old spoke to herself, I very well could be experiencing more symptoms. That is my belief. So this journey of healing is this cliche journey of self-love.
I totally believe in that. What we say in our mind has so much power. And, I teach people a lot about self-compassion because that inner critic that comes in, and it sounds like that is what you were experiencing. It's this negative beliefs about yourself, negative thoughts about yourself. How were you able to shift that? Was it like just being aware that it was happening? Was it changing thoughts?
A big shift came for me in 2009. So again, you're seeing this is a long journey,
Right.
When I say I want to remind anyone listening, I'm 22 years into this. I've never been an adult without it. So this is all I know, so it's not the snap of a fingers for some. And I think, unfortunately, we put pressure on ourselves that it needs to be quick,
It's a journey, right?
It's a journey. So for me in 2009, a few things happened. One, I kind of hit a rock bottom with my emotional eating. And I had to get right with myself. I had to really look at it and go, oh my God, Carlyn, what is going on? And in this part of this journey, I did like my first cleanse. So it was like awareness around food. But I also signed up for my first half marathon training group. Now, the reason this is so important is when you have MS, one of the things, it's move it or lose it is what I say. But back then they weren't encouraging exercise the way they are now. Now they recognize more like, no, we don't want to stop you. But there was more fear around overheating the body and exerting too much energy. So my doctors weren't encouraging me to run half marathons. But I'd been a cigarette smoker for 15 years. And this was kind of a closet side of me. So I was smoking in my 20s and it was cool. Or not cool. It was never cool. But it was more accepted.
Yeah. Now
here I was, my early 30s, and I recognized, oh my gosh, this isn't, I'm having a drink and having a cigarette. I think I'm a smoker. And what I ended up quitting cold turkey, which made me realize I have the power. And there's a whole story behind that I won't go into, but I quit cold turkey after 15 years, which again was this confidence in myself. Like I actually could do it. I could shift something. And with that, I empowered myself to sign up for my first half marathon. And when I signed up for this first half marathon, running didn't come naturally to me. I actually had to train. I had to fall in love with it. And I had to give myself permission to be a runner. And I ran my first half marathon January 2010, and it changed my life. Because not only did I was like, I'm the girl with MS running. I'm the girl that quit cigarette smoking, and I'm a runner now. And I was actually a pretty good runner. And I felt these endorphins, and I felt the physical change in me. Like you can't be emotional eating takes a back seat to nutritional eating for running. Like it was almost like a whole part of me just shifted. And that became this huge catalyst of transformation because it was just something healthy I poured myself into, surrounded by healthy people.
So you had that support.
So I had support. I just found something in myself that I'd never found before. And, fast forward, I went on to run 18 half marathons and 3 marathons. And I never in my wildest dreams, the girl diagnosed with MS at 19, at 31, 32, would have ever thought I would have become a runner. So transformation is both mental, but it can also be physical that I think initiates more of the mental. Like it's this, what came first, the chicken or the egg? To think yourself positive can sometimes be challenging. I think sometimes it takes action to practice that confidence, to allow yourself to step into something that then builds and builds and builds and becomes an even bigger part of your transformation. At least that's my story.
Yeah. And I believe that. I think that moving your body changes your brain chemistry. I mean, it's been researched. So showing that you not only changed the way you were thinking, but you changed the way you were moving, and the moving also helped change the way you were thinking, right?
Right. It really is that what and what habits, and I'm not superhuman. I still every day have to look at myself in the mirror and speak kindly to myself. I still every day have to inspire myself to go for the walk when I don't want to go for a walk. You know, I think it's an everyday journey, and there's ebb and flows. Like there were years of my life where I didn't have to remind myself, like 2015, 2014, 2015, 2016, like I was a runner. I was in it. Things were great. And I'm very fortunate. The MS has never re-presented itself. I've had MRIs. I've been med-free now. So what happened was I ran I ran my first half marathon, and it was right around the time I was actually starting to question my MS medication. And the reason I was questioning it was when I was initially diagnosed, I went on Avonex, which was one of the first 3 beta-serons that were out there. And I would take the injection, and that same day I would experience like massive flu-like symptoms. So taking the medicine made me sick. And I just accommodated my life around it, even though I didn't like it. You know, I had to accommodate my classes around it in school. Everything was around my medication. The next level of medication I was on was more than 1 shot a week. And it wasn't the same side effects, but I was getting like bee stings, and it felt like no one likes giving themselves shots. And my skin was reacting to the shots, and I never really knew if the shots were working. It was just a trust. I mean, that's all a lot of medication is we don't know what's going on in our body. We're just trusting it's working. And then the third medication I went on, I was one of the first 10,000 in the United States to go on Tysabri. And Tysabri is a monthly infusion. And I really, you have to just surrender, because I was signing my life away on documents with, you know, my lab work was being studied by the FDA. I mean, this was a new medication. When there's a new medication, there's no long-term studies. And when there's no long-term studies, we don't really know the long-term side effects, you know?
Right.
So 2.5 years into taking my medication, a small population that was on the medication for the same amount of time that I'd been on it started developing an incurable brain disease called PML. So this big red flag went off in the MS community of those taking Tysabri needed to be monitored more regularly. And there was now this new kind of risk involved with taking the drug that I was on. So I was told I needed 2 MRIs a month. 2 MRIs a year versus 1. I had to come in instead of every 6 months, every 3 months. And I looked at my neurologist and I said, so are you paying for these extra MRIs?
Yeah.
These aren't cheap. And I said, are we treating MS or are we treating a drug? And I really started to question the therapy that I was on. And because of what the bleep in my awareness of my thoughts, I recognized if I'm questioning, I could also be perpetuating this idea that this doesn't serve me anymore. And this is a little down the rabbit hole. I mean, for some people to really grasp, but this was nothing I was discussing with anyone else. This was all an internal process and journey. I didn't have anyone to discuss this with anyone. I didn't have anyone to talk about this with. I didn't really know anyone else on Tysabri. I was 31, 32. This was 2009. And I made this executive decision for myself I reached out to my doctor. I said, am I putting myself at risk by taking myself off the drug? And it stays in your system for 2 to 3 months. I said, okay. So I'm going to take myself off this. And if I have a relapse or if I feel like I'm being irresponsible, I'll go back on it. And not only did I never experience any new symptoms, but I noticed that my neurologist never called to follow up with me either. No one from the health professional group that I had been a part of for years now followed up with me. And I was like, am I only an MS? Do they only care about me when I'm on medication? And again, I'm not cursing any professionals out there. This is just my journey. But this is what allowed me to give myself permission to go off the drug. And I told myself I will go back on it if I need it. And I've never, ever felt, my body's never given me any signs that I'm mistreating it. You know, my running only got stronger. And my self-love and my self-confidence only got stronger. And this feeling of I'm doing this for me only got stronger. And so I say the happier I got, the healthier I got. And my journey has been one of taking my body back.
I love that. So as you're talking about that, I was thinking, so sometimes the side effect of the medicine actually is worse than the symptoms in some way. I mean, it sounds like
that's a whole nother can of worms. I was actually at a conference the other day, completely unrelated to anything we're talking about. And I noticed that there was another conference going on, and there was two women with a table set out, and there was a bunch of drugs. And so I'm just curious. So I go up and I go, "Oh, what's your conference about?" And she's like, "Oh, we're here representing," I do not remember the drug name, but it was an actual drug that you took just to handle the side effects of the other drug you were taking.
Wow.
And my jaw dropped. This was unheard of to me. I didn't even know this was out there. I'm very removed from the pharmaceutical world, truth be told, when it comes to healing. I'm not saying medications don't work, because they definitely do. And my medications served me in the beginning of my journey. I'm not here to say don't take medications. This was just my personal journey. But when I learned that, I was like, wow, there are meds out there in existence to help with the side effects of meds.
So you, of course, medication has its place and everything like that. But what you did is you just decided that you got to decide if you're going to take the medicine, not the doctor deciding, right? That was something you made a choice to do. And when you did that, you noticed that you felt happier and healthier as you were focusing on the self-love, the self-confidence.
I think it's important that any human being recognize we have the power to use our body like a science experiment. And what works for you even might not work for me.
Right.
But there's so many modalities out there. There's so many beautiful paths to self-healing out there. It's taking the time to get to know what works for you.
Right.
Do I feel better when I don't eat cheese pizza every night for dinner?
Yeah.
Yes, but I'm human. It might have nothing to do with the MS. It's just eating certain ways my body's going to respond better to it. But I'm only going to know if I try eliminating or try implementing these ways that are out there that everyone talks about. And I think that's where it gets really, where we step into fear sometimes with this journey is, are we doing something wrong for ourselves? Like there's so much out there. There's almost too much out there.
Yeah.
And it's using our body like a science experiment, but it's also, and this is where I get deep with the people I speak with I'm actually talking to a woman today who's been newly diagnosed with MS. I put myself out there. I make myself available because I want people. It's very important to talk to somebody that understands, not just empathizes. Empathy is a part of it, but to really connect with somebody that can talk to you about what you're experiencing when you're in a state of fear is huge. You need to feel hope. And so one of the things I always talk about with anybody I initially speak with is there's that little voice in you that no matter how good of friends you and I become, I will never know that little voice in you. It's a personal relationship that you have with that voice. And I always ask, is that voice nice to you? Are you living in alignment with that voice? And the alignment piece is something I think people kind of go, well, what does that mean? What do you mean by that? And I go, are you in a relationship that serves you? Are you in a career that serves you? How are you spending most of your time? Is it what you want to be doing? Is it speaking to your soul? Where do you experience the stress in your life and where are you resisting it? There's so many parts of us that in a perfect world, we want to be living in this utopia, like we want the perfect this and the perfect this and the perfect this. And I'm not saying that's attainable. I'm not saying it's about living perfect. But where do you have the power to actually change the circumstance so that it can be more in alignment to the life that you want to be leading? Let's not focus on the MS symptoms. Let's for a moment focus on the areas of your life that you would like to be a little different.
Mm.
And if we can shift those a little bit, maybe the symptoms shift a little bit. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But are you willing to work with me on this and play with me in this space to see if you start feeling better?
Yeah.
Because, yeah.
I think it's like that empowering thing. I noticed in your bio, it talked about being an intuitive, really listening to yourself, that intuition, which it sounds like is something that you're saying. And I agree with you. Everyone's journey is different. For some people, they need take their medication, maybe moving their body a bit, whatever feels like it works for you. I think I love that you're saying sometimes we're fearful of trying something because we don't know what might happen. And definitely, we want to listen to people who know some things, but we know a lot.
We know a lot.
Inside of ourselves, we actually, I think like your example of the cheese pizza, I actually know that when I eat certain things, I have problems with my allergies, or you know what I mean? You kind of know internally, and if we can trust that more, I think that's really important, to trust what internally is going on. And how would you help people tune into that? Like, what would you advise them to do to kind of tune into that part of them that just knows what the next thing is?
When I find myself questioning, and this happens a lot, what to do, I first think, does this feel light or does this feel heavy?
Mm.
Does this feel like joy, or there's a couple of different ways. There's a couple of different words I like to use. I like to think of the light versus heavy. I like to think of the trying versus allowing. Where am I forcing? Where am I like, I must do this, as opposed to, if it's meant to be, it's going to be, and believe. And that's where the trust comes in, we oftentimes create stress in our lives when we are trying to make someone understand us or trying to make this job work. And we exist in something thinking it's going to change. So it's like that intuitive side is taking a step back and going, okay, what have I done? What haven't I done? And what feels good to do now? It's really taking a step back and pausing, I think, and giving yourself that permission to go, what I feel might not be what others are saying to me. So most of my life, I've gone against the grain. I have gone against what others have advised me. No one advised me to go off my meds. In fact, my parents, one of the other factors I went off was I'd been working for a big public company, and everything with Tysabri was covered. I started working for a small private company and working from home. Awesome company. I wanted to be with this company, but I got a whole new insurance package. And so in this space of, I was already questioning, and already the icing on the cake was what was once covered was now $3,000 for my first infusion. And it made me go, wait, what? So it was, I'm not saying that's why I did it, but it was kind of that like straw that broke the back, right? So my parents were like, well, it's your health. We will pay the $3,000 for your infusion if that's what's holding you back from your meds. And I was like, no, don't you get it? This is confirming. And so for me, that was a confirmation. And I think that intuitiveness, we get signs and we get confirmations, but we oftentimes either don't want to see them, or just we're choosing to ignore, we're choosing not to pay attention. So the intuition is the inward journey, but it's also having that, allow yourself to have that awareness and be open to what is showing up for you, and not just existing and going through your day and numbing out and like taking this role that like has nothing to do with me. I have no role in this.
Yeah, not taking any personal responsibility, kind of being
right.
More of a victim. I love that idea of, because I do so much with mindfulness with my clients, mindful eating, mindfulness in our lives. It's that stepping back and allowing, instead of the striving, the pushing, I love even the imagery of that is just like you say, it's more peaceful. It's more like letting things happen in the way they're supposed to, and maybe trying some different things and creating what it is we want in life. I think your story is so moving because it's yours. It's individual. Yes. It's unique to you. No one else has that story. And so I want people, as they're listening to this, to recognize they have their own story too.
Yes.
And that they don't need to create an idea that they need to look like someone else in the media or on TV or any of that, but that your individual story is your own. Thank you so much for sharing that. We're going to take just a quick break, but when we come back, I'd love for you to share a little bit more of, your story propelled you to start a business, right? You're now teaching other people how to let go of limiting beliefs, how to live their best life. And I would love for you to share with us kind of what you do to help others be able to shift that inside themselves too.
Have you ever had one of those days when you feel like you can't keep doing it all? When you feel like the demands of work, family, and life are just too much? Are you trying to make others happy, but you are miserable? Do you feel like your brain is constantly in a fog? Do you worry all the time and can't shut your brain off? Do you wish you had more time for yourself? Do you want to find more stillness and quiet your mind? Many women feel overwhelmed and stressed with the demands of family, work, and other responsibilities. It can literally push them over the edge. What if you could have a weekend away to dedicate to you, to your well-being and self-care, to eat healthy food, practice invigorating yoga, get calming massages, and spend time in quiet meditation with nature? Join Flourish Wellness for our Mindfulness in the Mountains wellness retreat in the beautiful mountains of Eden, Utah. Learn to quiet the mind and to listen to your body and fill your soul with self-love and acceptance. Register now. Space is limited. To check out the cabin and accommodations and to register, go to flourishwellnessconsulting.com under live events or email Camille at flourishwellnessconsulting.com. This fall, make yourself a priority and learn to make peace with your body and like who you are for good.
Welcome back, everybody, to Wellness Wisdom. We're having an awesome conversation today. You guys are going to want to listen to this one like a couple times over because there's so much juice to it and meat. And the thing that is I've been thinking about is as I've talked to Carlyn Shaw, who she's a connection coach, a motivational speaker. She's amazing. But really, she has had her own story with being diagnosed with multiple sclerosis and what she did about that. Right? It's a story of empowerment. It's a story of what do you do when life throws you a lemon, or throws you something difficult or a challenge. And I asked Carlyn before the break if you would share with us, this story that you went through of not only the diagnosis of MS and what do you do and how do you help yourself with the symptoms, but also just that feeling of loss of your friends and you've created your own life now. You've created what you want things to be like. How do you help other people who are saying things like, well, other people can be wealthy, but I can't, or I'll never lose weight because everyone in my family is overweight. You hear these limitations that we put on ourselves, and maybe you're working with people who have been diagnosed with different illnesses. But what's the first step you take to kind of start helping them recognize some of those limitations that they're putting on themselves?
Well, the first thing I want to share is with strangers to friends and the community I've built. It's definitely based off my life. And so if you've been listening this far, you can see there's a lot of stories. So with all these stories, there's always a time where you're in between the stories. So the people that are coming to strangers to friends very often are what I like to call in between stories. What does that mean? It means, it could be health. It could be, I was healthy. Now I've been given MS. Now what? It could be, I was working for a full-time corporate position and now I'm an entrepreneur. Now what? It could be, I just lived in this state. Now I live in this state and I'm starting over. Now what? It could be, I was happily married and now I'm going through a divorce. Now what? So there are these pockets in our lives of this space where there's room. This is the cocoon. And this is the space where you get to choose to invite more people into your world and be open to more people in your world from a space that's unfamiliar. So you're like, well, what does this look like? So it comes back to, in order for someone to know what you need and to show up for you, you must share your own story as well. Then when you say like, well, okay, well, what if you're someone that goes, I can't be this, they can be this. I can't be this, they can be that. It's looking at your own story and identifying where you're labeling yourself. So a lot of what I preach is letting go of labels. I like to bring everybody in the same playing field, which is why we don't exchange. In a perfect world, we're not talking about our jobs. We're not talking about how we make money. We're talking about what's something unique about you I wouldn't know unless you told me. I'm talking about what's something like you're passionate about, and it's how we're identifying ourselves. So if we are telling ourselves, I think there's two different ways I can answer this. Like if you're someone that's telling yourself, I can't do this, then I would look around at the people you're surrounding yourself with, because even just changing the people you're surrounding yourself with that can help lift you up and be supportive and be accountability. If your family members aren't supportive of you, they might not be the ones to turn to in this shift that that your soul is ready for, and it's an unfortunate reality when you recognize sometimes the people in your life might not be the people you need for the next chapter, and how to address that. And that's something I talk a lot about with people as well, in terms of boundaries and terms of in terms of the self-love that in the choices you're making by the people you're with. But the inner, if I don't know, I'm trying to think of the best way to articulate this. I really like to hold people accountable. So there's no sugarcoating. And when I speak to somebody, I share all of my stories as raw, and there's a lot of stories. I mean, I didn't have 2 front teeth for the age of 36 and still went about my life the same. They were knocked out in a bike accident. And most people would say to me, oh my gosh, I never would have gone out. I definitely wouldn't have smiled. I definitely wouldn't have done this. Like I would have holed up. And I'm like, that is the opposite of what I chose. And in doing that, so much was gifted into my life in terms of people meeting, opportunities, a blog post of mine that went viral. Brene Brown retweeted it. I mean, this is what happens when you step through the story. So first, it's really looking at your story and going, how am I letting this define myself? Then it's knowing our stories connect us all. And other people out there we're all going, if you look at anyone's journey, it pretty much all comes back to the same thing: self-love, self-confidence, self-worth. If your story is holding you back, there's an element in you that doesn't believe you're worthy of shifting that story. But there's so much power in talking to somebody else that's going through the same story and can understand you. That in itself is like the best medicine on the planet, to know you're not alone. Because when you're going through something and you feel alone, which is so much of we're strangers to, I know that feeling. I was 19 and went through what I did alone. I didn't know anyone that lost their teeth at the age of 36. I went through that alone. I've gone, I've moved to new cities by myself. I went through that alone. So these have all been these alone journeys that I've had that I can now share with other people and go, okay, you don't have to be alone. Actually, I'm going to not only be there for you, but I'm going to bring people together and show that we're all connected. And be okay with your journey. Like, it's not, lose the weight if you really want to lose the weight. Don't lose. If you're happy being the weight you are, just be happy with the weight you are. We're not designed to be, I am who I am because of the genetics of my parents in some ways, and some ways of my eating habits. But like, we're all these unique expressions, And so that's my passion with Strangers to Friends, is like showing that we're all connected through our unique expressions and through our stories. It's not about shame. We're not here to sabotage, but to be gentle with yourself through the transition of being in between stories.
That's really powerful. I was thinking about how you were talking about just all these different life transitions we go through, and how that really does make us wonder about our worthiness, our self-love, our connectedness to other people. and what we believe about this next chapter in our lives. So when you're working with someone, can you tell us like maybe someone that you worked with? Yeah.
I'll use an example of someone with MS, since that's what we're talking about. So a woman had been told about me, and for a year, through a friend in San Diego, and the woman lives here in Colorado. And for a year, she was following me on social media and Instagram, and just, loved everything. She really resonated with what I was writing. But she didn't have it in her to reach out to me yet until she was leaving a doctor's appointment and been given some news that was hard for her to handle. And she took a chance and she called me, and I happened to be available. And I said, are you available to meet for a walk? Because I like to, if you're here in person, I like to meet in person, because I know the value of moving through life together. And I know the value of not sitting across from each other and talking, but walking side by side, so we're equals. And we can, and I'm going to share, and I'm going to invite you to share. And so this woman thought she was showing up to me because she was diagnosed with MS. Well, it turns out she was in the middle of a meltdown in her marriage. I mean, everything was going wrong in her marriage. They had just moved into this like 6,000 square foot home that she didn't want to be in, but they moved in with, there were all these things in her life, forget the MS, that were just off. And so with her journey, I was like, okay, I get that you're really scared with the MS. I get that you don't know what medicines to take, and you want me to tell you what medicines to take. And I get this, but do me a favor. We're going to work on some other areas of your life for a little bit, and it was a conversation that I wanted her to have with her husband. It was taking time for herself to go do some self-care, because she was so wrapped up in her kids and so wrapped up in keeping this family together that she really wasn't taking any time for herself. And so, and then I was like, come to my strangers to friends experiences. Like, I want you to just be around other people and know that you're not alone, because these stranger to friend gatherings that I do, a lot of people think, well, I don't need to go hang out with strangers. I already have community, and I always say, that's not what this is about. We are all coming together on the same playing field. Like, this isn't about elitist. This isn't about your bank accounts. This isn't about anything. This is get back to being human with yourself. Get back to being human with others. This is gratitude. This is appreciation, and these are things that you're struggling with right now in your own world based on the stories that you're telling me. And so through our journey together, I actually invited her to join me for a conference through an organization called Celebrate Your Life. And I was like, you need to really decide you want to level up. And if you're really ready to level up, I'm going to hold your hand through this entire process, and I'm not letting you go. And I'm here to say that this woman is happily divorced right now. She's doing better. Like, she actually have a testimonial she wrote me not that long ago. She doesn't recognize herself now compared to who she was when she first called me in that state of fear and panic from her doctor's appointment. But I didn't do this for her. I just held her and supported her and encouraged her and was a mirror back to her through the process. And I intuitively offered her suggestions, on things that I knew of. What you could try this. How does this speak to you? Would this sound good to you? And I gave her the choice to be in control. So sometimes when working with people, they need an opportunity to say yes, because the yes isn't in them. They're not aware of it yet, So I like to say I'm a catalyst to yes and, because I have so many tools and I have connections to so many people around the country that have their own unique ways of offering healing and offering this and offering. I like to encourage people, like, it might not be me. Maybe you're showing up to me because I know somebody that I'm going to actually put you in touch with to carry your journey even further. And it's, again, that's one story. I have another woman who had nothing to do with MS. We never met in person. It was just over the phone. Okay. And over the phone, she recognized, her husband had left her with a 5-month-old.
Oh, wow.
And she thought that this was going to be her happily ever after. And so we really took a look at the elements, the areas in her life where she was holding on. So now her daughter wasn't 5 months old. Her daughter was 2. And this is the space she reached out to me. And we were able to discover that she had boxes of baby clothes in her garage that was prohibiting her from parking her car in the garage. But she couldn't let him go. And so it was us looking at where were the areas in her life where she was still holding on to a story that was no longer serving. So this is the power of shifting the story. There were women out there with young babies that didn't have money to afford baby clothes. How could these clothes now serve? How could she pay it forward with these clothes? How could these clothes, these baby clothes she was holding on to hold on to a time in her life that she longed for, how could she give back? How could there be gratitude? How could there be appreciation around it? So there's small things that when you don't, it's hard to see it for yourself, and can be resistance around it. So what I like to do is show up for someone and just really take a big, broad look at the whole picture and go, where do you have control? And where can I help support you in getting a piece of yourself back? Where you feel like something outside of yourself took it away from you. And that, again, can be the career. It can be the relationship. It can be the health. There's so many ways that we can think life is happening against us, but we have the power to shift the story and allow it to serve us.
That's really empowering, because a lot of times we don't even know what's holding us back. And I think that's the power of like having a mentor or coach or somebody that can kind of help you look at things in a different way and maybe see what kinds of things might be holding you back, or that you're not living true to yourself, to your values, that kind of thing.
I mean, I have my own people. I mean, I'm sharing all these stories, but it's not like I don't have my own people I turn to.
Yeah.
I can get I'm locked in my own perspectives at times I think you hear about, like, most coaches have coaches.
Mm-hmm.
It's just about having somebody that you trust and somebody that you value their input and their perspective to offer guidance, to say, it's not me going, this is what you need to do. It's, how would it feel if you did this? Is this something that you could consider? And I'm not here to force you into anything. Mm-hmm. I'm here for you to think about why you are or you aren't.
Exploring possibilities together, right? Kind of looking at what's possible.
Can I tell you, that woman I just talked about that cleared the stuff out of her garage? Her testimonial blew my mind, because she's an example of, like, the first woman I talked about, the results were a little more immediate. The other woman, the results were a little more gradual. So she's like, never in my wildest dreams did I think working with Carlyn would give me the courage to fulfill a dream of signing up to climb Kilimanjaro.
Oh, wow.
This is a woman who wasn't making time for herself to go on hikes, and we live in Colorado.
Mm-hmm.
She climbed Kilimanjaro last year. She bought herself a house. She was renting in the house where it had the garage. She bought herself a house for her and her daughter. I mean, her life has actually changed so much. And it was just this little bit of self-love that became this massive, like, I don't know, like this beautiful, just, it kept going and going and going. But it wasn't me in the picture anymore. I mean, it was, I'm there if she needs me. But she did this for herself.
Yeah, that's amazing what you can create, and that catalyst of, if you have love for yourself, if you have confidence that anything's possible, right? That you can create these things in your life. I love what you're doing to help other people, really just to hold and support them, to mirror back to them what there might be that they could try, or the possibilities that are out there. We're going to take another quick break. When we come back, I'd like for you to share with us, if you say you met someone who just was saying, I'm stuck, kind of a thing, what would be some of the first steps that you would have them try out?
Do you feel stressed, overweight, and unhappy? Are you tired of setting goals that you don't accomplish? Do you want more energy, motivation, and focus to create your dreams? Many people struggle to keep up the commitment, motivation, and confidence to be successful, to reach their goals and aspirations. They often let other things get in the way of their personal health and happiness. It doesn't have to be this way. You can change. Join us for a 6-week online health transformation workshop. Learn about the mind-body connection, overcome obstacles to health, create daily health rituals, get support from others like you, and change your life for good. Register now at flourishwellnessconsulting.com under online group workshops or email Camille at flourishwellnessconsulting.com. Our gift to you as a podcast listener is $50 off the transformation workshop. Use the promo code podcast50 when you register. This new year, make peace with your body and like who you are for good.
Welcome back, everybody, to Wellness Wisdom. We're having a great conversation about, well, it's about a lot of different things, but mostly how to overcome the limiting beliefs that we have and live true to ourselves, live true to what our purpose is. And I'm talking to Carlyn Shaw, she's an amazing connection coach, motivational speaker, and writer. You're just listen to this over and over again because there's so many good points that she makes about what we can shift in our lives to be more true to who we are, to really recognize what's going on inside of us when it comes to our health, our relationships, any part of what we might be struggling with. And Carlyn, before the break, I asked you if you would just give us a few tips. If someone came to you and said, I'm just really stuck in my life, I don't feel like I'm progressing, I don't feel like I'm moving forward, what would you give them as, a couple of things to consider?
First and foremost, for me, it always comes down to action. Personally, if I'm having a day where I feel stuck, I go for a walk. I love downloading, and I'm a big podcast listener, audiobook listener, and just getting my body in movement. So when you feel stuck, like what is the opposite of stuck? It's unstuck. And what is unstuck? It's movement, So, they say it's working out isn't hard. It's getting to the gym, that's the first step. So it's where can you create some movement in your life? And it doesn't have to be the big elephant. It can be the bite, it's humbling for me. I used to be a marathon runner and I don't run anymore. So now it's like I go on walks or I go volunteer. Like if you're like, how I feel stuck, I want to meet more people. Like there's so many ways in your community to go volunteer. And when you're volunteering, you're going to be surrounded by people that are passionate about the same thing you're passionate about. So there's a common denominator, right? So go put yourself around positive people, see where you can get involved. And it's true. Like when we give back to others, like true karma is not the doing to receive, it's the getting and the giving, like there's this instant exchange. So I'm a big fan of volunteering in the community, a big fan of getting active, signing up for a league. And if you say, oh, I'm not good enough, I'm not a good baseball player, I'm not a good softball player, it's just like anything in life. We all have to start somewhere. I was not a good runner. Never did I think I'd run a marathon. I mean, I cried after my first 6-mile run, like I was like, oh no, I have to get back to my core, which means I have to go another 3 miles back, so
feeling.
it is just, it's having grace with yourself, you're stuck for a reason. We become stuck because we're supposed to figure out the way to get unstuck. And in that journey of getting unstuck, that's usually where the magic happens. I mean, when we're inspired by anybody on the planet, why are we inspired by them? We're typically inspired because we watch them respond to something in a way that we go, would we have done that? I don't know if I would have done that. Wow, that's amazing they did it. But the only way we can be inspired by that somebody is because they did something. So
take a step.
Take a step. It's just take a step. And whether it's, reach out to a coach or a mentor. I mean, I truly believe we are not supposed to do this. Like I have to watch how I phrase this because I think it is an individual journey. At the same time, I don't think we're supposed to do the journey alone.
Yeah. There's other people there to help.
There's something about being independent. Yes. And following your own compass. Yes. And listening to your own guidance. Yes. But there's a reason. I mean, we're supposed to exist as we're tribal, like humans are tribal. And unfortunately we've become a society that, hides behind screens and lives in cubby holes and doesn't know our neighbors the same way. And it's just, I'm a big fan of getting back to basics. Like, let's pretend it's 1975, can we? Because, people just were
born.
People, oh, it was? Yay. People were just more engaging, you know? And I think when you're stuck, we get stuck. I know I get stuck when the ideas and everything are just bouncing around in my own head, and I'm not speaking them out, and I'm not sharing. And there's so much value to getting it out. And for some people, that's journaling. For some people, there's so many ways that we can get things out. So I think it's just, where can you take a step? And then there's that little voice that goes, well, if I knew that, I wouldn't be asking what to do because I'm stuck. So It's like, we have to start looking at the patterns that we're in and holding ourselves accountable and going, you know what? I am stuck. I can't do this on my own. I'm going to reach out to Carlyn, or I'm going to reach out to somebody else and go, I really want to shift. Can you help me?
Mm-hmm.
And
just trying something.
Yes.
Yeah. Why not try something? I mean, I think I've learned as an entrepreneur that there's no shame in trying something, and maybe it's not what worked. Maybe you tried it and that wasn't your thing. It's okay. But you made a step in that direction of wanting to make something happen, right? And creating something.
Right. My stranger to friend experiences, if you're in Colorado, you can connect with me on my website and I can keep you posted, and hopefully these will become nationwide. I have a big vision, but every single person that comes to an event for the first time, they come by themselves. And that is the first step. That is the first step of vulnerability. It's not showing up. There's two levels to vulnerability. There's the one we, I think, naturally assume, and that is you and I talking right now, and I'm being vulnerable with you. Therefore, we're being vulnerable together. But the first step of this was me reaching out to you and introducing myself. I had no idea how you would respond, right? Mm-hmm. And I said, we have a mutual friend. And so that first step that we take is that moment we're vulnerable with ourselves. And so anyone that comes to anything I create, I say to them, oh my gosh, you're so brave for coming here. And then they just kind of look at me a little funny and I go, I know, isn't it a shame that as adults, we don't get told we're brave? Mm-hmm. We tell kids they're brave for doing things for the first time.
Right.
When was the last time anyone told you you were brave?
Right.
Oh my gosh, it's brave to go, try that, sewing group you've been saying you're going to try for so long, but you're not really a sewer, but you have some passion around it.
Yeah, I love that. This is really powerful because, taking action actually opens opportunities up for us. I know I've seen that in my life with my business and just in relationships with other people. And then also recognizing how important community is for us, right? That sometimes we're in that place where we don't know what the next step is, but maybe we're inspired by someone else who says something. I know that's been the case for me in so many ways with connections that I have through business, through family, all of that. So thank you so much for opening our minds a bit today and sharing your story and being vulnerable with, what your journey with multiple sclerosis, your journey with, self-love and being okay with who you are and how that's propelled some things for you in your life. And I hope as you're listening to this, that you can listen to what it is that is a tidbit that you can take away that you're feeling inspired to do. What's that next step that you can take in loving yourself, in taking care of yourself, in maybe just changing one thing that feels good to you. Thank you so much, Carlyn, for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
And if people want to know what you're doing, what's the best way for them to reach you?
So my website is strangerstofriends.com. So that's TO. So strangers to friends. I have a Facebook group that anybody can join where I share, we talk about community and we create connection and we talk about self-love. So that's Strangers to Friends as well. I'm on Instagram at Strangers to Friends. But if you want to connect with me more personally, you can find me at carlynshaw.com, and that's CarlynShaw. And there is another Carlyn Shaw on the planet. So she claimed all the social media links before I'm actually friends with her. It's a whole other stranger to friend story. But so I'm at the Carlyn Shaw. So I'm like, she can be Carlyn Shaw, and I've claimed the Carlyn Shaw.
Okay, cool.
So all of my handles are at the Carlyn Shaw. And I would love to connect with anybody. I always offer 15 minutes on the phone for anybody that would like to connect to see if we can explore if there's a way I can serve, if there's a way I can be a catalyst, and to give and create space for anyone that wants to share with me, as well as anybody with MS. I'm actually happy to offer 30 minutes on the phone with anybody that is going through something and just needs to speak to somebody and not feel so alone.
Oh, I love that. I think when we can feel supported and loved and cared about, it makes a huge difference. That's why, like you said, we're tribal. We were meant to be in community. So thank you so much for being with us today. And everybody, if you enjoy listening to this and you want to, have more information about how to overcome limiting beliefs and take better care of your mental and physical health, please subscribe to the Wellness Wisdom on iTunes and Spreaker, and continue to listen to, just get some ideas for things that you can try one step at a time. And I hope as you do so, you can make peace with your body and like who you are. Take care, everybody.